Now, we just looked at the incredible value of 2-on-1 gripping as a setup to triangles from a seated guard situation. Now we're going to look at my next favorite method of gripping an opponent to enter into triangles from a seated guard. This is the use of an overtie. First, what's an overtie? Let's have a look at a situation where Mateus is on two knees in front of me and I'm on two knees. This would be a collar tie where Mateus has a grip on my collar just like so. So this would be a standard collar tie. If I put my own collar tie on him, we would both have a collar tie on each other. Okay? An overtie is where I go over and around my opponent's collar tie and I take a collar tie on the same side, outside and over his collar tie. Okay? So here we both have conventional collar ties. Here I have an overtie. He's gripping left-handed and I'm gripping over his left arm right-handed, like so. He has the inside position and I have the outside position. Now, this is an incredibly valuable grip in many different ways. Okay, in the standing position, we often use this to set up slide-bys, etc., so that we can go behind people and get to their back. Okay. In the case of the triangle from seated guard, we use it as a means of controlling our opponent's posture and keeping an arm trapped. Remember, our ultimate goal in every triangle setup is the same. It's to create a one-in, one-out situation. And the overtie is a splendid way of doing this. We're going to start off just like so, with our training partner working in. He's going to go in and take a collar tie just like this. Okay. Initially, I can play wrists and triceps. That's fine. Okay. Good way to prevent him from passing guard, etc. But at some point in the action, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to sneak on an overtie on my training partner. It doesn't feel very threatening from Mateus's perspective. Then I'm going to take my other hand and I'm going to go through and I'm going to hold my training partner at the elbow. As before, I'm going to put my foot on the same side as the trapped arm. Not the opposite side where now he could start going into ashigarami attacks on me. Okay? Obviously we don't want this kind of thing happening. That would be annoying to have to fight way out of a leg lock when you were going for an upper body hold. So we come in here and we get our grips. Interestingly, when Mateus goes to yank his arm out, it's shockingly difficult because the head is controlled and the elbow is controlled. So now it's very easy for us to place our foot in and create that same unweighted foot that we saw earlier. When Mateus tries to grab my foot, it's so hard for him to stop that maneuverability. And we pull all the way around the corner. Now, because of the very nature of the overtie, we're locked in place with head control right from the start. So it's really easy for me to put a hand inside my training partner's legs and start that inversion process that always brings our body out and around the corner and into a situation where we can lock the figure of four directly over his head and get to the finish. Let's have a look at it from another angle. Mateus comes out and puts on a collar tie just like so. Okay. From here, I go through and I take the overtie and elbow. From here, I place my foot on the floor and create an unweighted leg. All my weight is on my buttocks, so my foot is unweighted and very mobile. And as a result, I can easily pull him in and lock up the beginnings of a triangle. Now from here, my hand feeds on the inside of my training partner's legs, and we start that action of turning the corner. From here, I lock the figure of four. You'll notice my knee is pointing in towards the crotch, so that as we lock the figure of four, we get an enormously tight stranglehold for a very secure finish. This is an excellent way to get into triangles. In a combat situation, very often there will be quite a bit of pommeling for position. So realistically, it'll look something like this. We have an opponent working here, and we start off gripping, etc., etc. I get my first grip. He pulls his arm out before I can get it, and then from here he comes up and collar ties on the other side, and we come through and work. So there's always this constant pommeling from side to side on my training partner. Eventually, bang, we go in and catch. And then from here, we're ready to go. It's an easy thing now to turn the corner and from here lock up our triangle in the regular fashion. Realistically, as I said, there'll be a lot of hand fighting as this is going on. You can expect me tying up wrists, attempting arm drags. He goes to pull out, yank out, so you're controlling that wrist, and there it is. There's the grip we're looking for. Okay. Once in, foot goes on the hip, second leg goes over the top, and we're ready to play. That overtie is a very, very valuable addition to your setups to triangles from the seated guard situation. Now, we just looked at the over tie as a setup to triangles from a seated guard situation. What about regular collar ties? Can I use those? Absolutely. Collar tie is an excellent way of controlling entries into a triangle because it directly controls your opponent's head. And all of his posturing begins at the head. So if you start with a collar tie, you have a great chance of holding him in and getting to a good triangle. Question is, how are you going to manage this? How are you going to work your opponent's arms in here? Well, let's have a look at this right now. We have a training partner on 2 knees. Very often from here, I will go out and initiate a collar tie by coming through and getting a hold of my training partner's elbow. Okay, so if we're here in a hand fight situation, I catch his wrist and I go through and I take the elbow joint just like so. Once I've secured the elbow, my second hand comes up and locks onto my training partner's collar just like so. So I have an underhand grip on the elbow. I'm not going overhand. I see many people in the sport of jiu-jitsu going overhand. There's times it's a good thing, but not for the triangle we're about to look at. Okay, so from hand fight, I go through and I secure my training partner's hand, and there's the elbow. Once I get the elbow, I go through and I secure the collar. Now I put my foot on the same side as the elbow control. If I go on this side, he can just go ashigarami, and now I'm fighting my way out of legs. Okay, so we always go same side as the trapped arm. Okay, so once again, wrist, elbow, collar tie. From here, I put my foot on the hip and I place my foot just inside my training partner's bicep. Okay, now from here, I go around the corner, kick through, and as always from here, we lock up an initial trap triangle. Off that initial trap triangle, we're always going to get control of our training partner's head. I go in, I get a grip on my training partner's legs. From here, as always, we make that turn that gets us up, so our 2 feet are pointing in a forwards direction. I control my training partner's head so that when I lock the figure of 4, it's a very clean lock on top of my training partner's head and neck. On the other side, from any situation where I go through on my training partner, I catch the wrist and I get a hold of the elbow. I go through, there's my collar tie like so. I place my foot on the hip, and from here it creates an unweighted foot that can pass through and end up in a fine attacking position. As always from here, we get a hold of our training partner's head as he goes to posture up and away. We're always looking to make that turn. From here, my knee points in towards my training partner's crotch, my 2 lower legs pointing in the same direction, so we can lock a tight figure of 4 for a good finish down on the mat. Done in this way, the collar tie can be a very valuable addition to your triangle setups from a seated guard situation. We're looking at the idea of using various grips to set up front triangles from a seated guard situation. The general point that we're trying to raise is that when it's time to learn or mastery of the front triangle, begin in a seated position. It's much easier to move both yourself and your opponent from a seated position to enter into the 1-in, 1-out situation than it is from supine situations, which are traditionally used to teach triangles to beginners. One of my favorite grips to work triangles in general, and seated guard in particular, is the overhook. This is a great means of keeping my opponent close to me. People are always trying to posture up and away from triangles. The beauty of an overhook is it holds them in close, makes posturing up and away very difficult. But it comes at a price. It means he's so close to me that it's not always easy to throw my foot over and get to the 1-in, 1-out situation that we're looking for. So we're going to employ a trick. We're going to use the overhook to hit a sweep. One of the most well-known sweeps in the sport of jiu-jitsu, the hook sweep, or sumigeshi as my students often refer to it. As our opponent falls over onto his back, no one when they're in the top position wants to be the guy that got swept. Okay, you lose points. You lose top position. Even in a submission-only match, many people quickly get back up to top position when they feel they've been swept. We're going to use his reaction to set up a nice triangle. Let's have a look at a situation where Mateus is on 2 knees and we're working in the usual fashion. Okay, I'm going to take Mateus forward into an overhook by coming up to a collar tie and bringing him towards me until I can lock up my overhook in place. As with any overhook, my thumb should be close to my pectoral muscle, just like so. Now, from here, I'm going to take my second hand and I'm going to secure his wrist. I'm going to push his wrist inwards by putting my elbow close to my hip, and I'm going to grab my own wrist with the figure of 4. Okay. Now, Mateus has good head position, but that's about to change. I'm going to tilt Mateus down and attempt the sumigashi, and I'm going to put him over to his back. Just like so. Now, if Mateus just lay there, I would get top position. Okay, that would be a win for me. I get up on top and I can attack. Very few people will accept being swept to their back. The overwhelming majority of your opponents will fight to get back up. I step over his body and I let Mateus fight his way back up to his knees. But as he gets back up to his knees, I still have the same grip. You can't see it because it's underneath his chest, but don't worry, I'll soon show an angle where you can see it. My grip hasn't changed. It's still the same figure of 4. As Mateus comes back up and reclaims top position, he finds himself getting caught in the beginnings of a triangle. Now from here, as always, I cover the head. That's the first thing that's going to move away from you. It's always the head. So we always go in and control it. Now we get our scoop grip. We turn the corner on our training partner, our 2 feet facing forward. We still have good control of the head, so he goes to pull away. It won't be easy. We lock the figure of 4, my knee pointing in towards his crotch, so that when we lock the triangle, it's directly behind his head, and the strangle comes on immediately. Once again, let's start off with Mateus here in my butterfly guard. From here, we start off with the regular hand fight. I come up, I draw him forwards so I can take my overhook in place. I secure his wrist, my own wrist. I put my shoulder down on the mat and I successfully sweep him over and stand over his body. As Mateus gets back up into top position, watch as his head rises, my leg goes under. I still have his wrist so I can throw over the top and secure the head. As he goes to pull away from me, you still have that head in place. And as a result, we can quickly go around the corner and into a winning position. This is a very, very useful way to use overhooks from a seated situation to put your opponent down briefly enough to enter into the 1 in 1 out position and secure a triangle in the fashion that we've seen before. We're looking at the idea of various grips as setups to triangles, in particular the front triangle, Omote Senkaku, working from bottom position. Let's look now, we just saw overhooks, let's look now at underhooking. Now, the overhook had its value because it controlled distance between us, and I can keep my opponent head to head in a position where we could set up the triangle relatively easily. Let's look now at the incredible value of underhooking and understand both its strengths and weaknesses, because there are some weaknesses here. When I underhook from this position, there's a problem that if my head position is poor and I'm too far from my opponent, it's very easy for my opponent to take his elbow back inside, and now I lose the underhook. He can pummel into his own underhook, flatten me out, and cause problems here. Okay, now we have to go to work in other ways. So my underhook has to be locked up in certain ways to make it effective. Okay, let's turn a little bit closer to the camera here and understand the nature of underhooking. I want my hand cupping over my opponent's shoulder so that the blade of my hand comes over like so and cups the front deltoid. If I have a superficial grip on my opponent's rear deltoid, it's very easy for him to slip his elbow through and then punch in his own underhook and start the action of flattening me out. Okay. So it's important here that when I enter into the underhook, if he's posted on my shoulder, I want to clear his elbow out of the way and come through, and I put the edge of my hand, like I was doing a chop, right there on my training partner's deltoid, and I lock in like so. So that's my hand position. You'll notice when I grip, my grip is that of a false grip. I reach with a bent wrist around like so. So here we start off, I clear his elbow out to the side, I punch in my underhook, and then from here, I cup the front deltoid like this. Okay, so that's my hand position. Next important thing is my elbow position. When I hold the underhook, I want my forearm parallel with the mat. I don't want my elbow down. When my elbow is down, it's so easy for him to clear my elbow and bring his elbow inside, and now I've lost my underhook entirely. Okay, I want to create a situation where my elbow is high. The higher my elbow, the greater the control I have with the underhook. So I come in, there's my hand covering the front deltoid, and you'll see that my elbow is very, very high. If we just bring you around in this direction, we'll show you from a different angle. Okay, this would be an example of a poor underhook. My hand is here, low on the deltoid, like so. Okay, and my elbow is low. This makes it very easy for Mateus to bring his elbow over the top and punch in his own underhook. And then from here, now I've got to go back to my overhook series. Okay, so when we enter, I make sure that I go high with my hand, cup the front deltoid, and my elbow goes high, so that my whole forearm is parallel with the mat. And as a result, I'm in a good position to go on the attack. When he goes to pull his elbow away from me now, it's significantly more difficult for him. Okay, that's how we want to be gripping effectively with our underhook. Now, let's put this in a context where we can actually work our way into a triangle in a very common situation. The first triangle that we're going to look at involves us working from a supine position. We've been flattened out to our back, and we work to go into a triangle from an underhook. I'll just have Mateus on this side. Okay, so we'll start off in what seems like a pretty hopeless situation. We've been flattened out down here on the mat. Our first move from this position is going to be to hit a forward shift that takes me from a supine position up to one where I can get up on my elbow. So we're going to hit the forward shift and come up like so. And I'm going to punch in my underhook, and we're going to come down here to an elbow like so. Okay, very important, I'm here on my elbow. If I go down to a shoulder in a situation with an underhook, it's very, very hard for me to get the space I need to get into an underhook, into a triangle. Okay, what I need is mobility, and the best way for me to do that is to work here from my elbow. Once I have my elbow on the floor behind me and my foot goes either on his thigh or on the floor on the outside, now I have an ability to move my hip. Okay, and that's always what I'm looking for. Once my hip starts moving in this position, it becomes very, very easy for me now to take my foot and pull my opponent into a good triangle attack. Off that triangle, I immediately lock my feet, the trap triangle. I take my hand from overhook, punch through, and get a hold of the head. As my opponent goes to pull away from me, it's so easy now to hook into our usual attacking sequence and have our feet pointing well forward from this position. When he goes to posture up and away from the triangle, it's so difficult. And as a result, we can easily put the wedge in behind, and from here, lock up the figure of four for the strong triangle finish. Once again, from a situation where my training partner has me flattened out down on the mat, we're going to hit a small forward shift action where I take his body weight and move up just like so. Now, from here, there's my underhook in place, there's my high elbow position, and from this situation, it's not a difficult thing for me to place a foot on my training partner's hip. When he goes to move in towards me, it's a difficult thing. There's a lot of pressure there stopping him. And as a result, we can quickly throw our leg over our training partner's shoulder and lock the trap triangle. We know that once we get a trap triangle, everything's about the progression into the figure four triangle. That's usually done against resistance. First line of resistance is almost always posture, so we always want to get a hold of our training partner's head. The next line of resistance is almost always some kind of stacking action. Okay, so we want to make sure before our opponent get a good stack that we get angle on our training partner. So now stacking will be more or less useless. In a position like this, it's easy for us to lock the figure of four and strangle. If my opponent was naive and continued to stack, we could easily put him over and onto his back. Let's have a look at it from a slightly different angle so you can see that underhook action. From a situation where my opponent holds me down like so, and we hit the forward shift and punch in. Now, from here we get that underhook, elbow high, and we're in the perfect position now to take our foot and kick through. Initially, we lock the trap triangle, we punch our hand inside, we pull in with our two knees and get to a good angle. We turn on our training partner and start that action of locking up the figure of four. This is one classic way in which we can use underhooks to enter into a triangle. Now, let's look at another method which involves a very different underhook. In the previous move, we used a fairly classic form of underhook where my left hand underhooked my opponent's right arm. Let's look now at an underhook which involves still underhooking the right arm but going across to the opposite shoulder. This is the far side underhook. Mateus is going to be here. from a situation where we start off as we did previously. We clear our training partner's elbow. Here's a conventional underhook. I'm going to go unconventional, put my head in, and my hand goes across to the far side. So instead of being near side, I go far side. And it gives me control of both the head and the arm. It creates a very deep sense of underhook. When my opponent goes to yank his arm out, it's very, very difficult. Okay? From this general situation, I'm going to come up to a position where I'm on my knees now. Okay? From the kneeling position, my opponent's interested in putting on a whizzer and working here. But it's hard for him to use the whizzer effectively because of the very nature of my underhook. If I'm in here and he applies a whizzer, I feel the pressure. But when I go across to the far side, it strongly negates his attempts to apply his whizzer with strength against me. I put my knee against my training partner's hip, just like so, and in one motion I'm going to bring my foot close to his knee and throw my leg over my training partner's lower back. And as a result, we're in the perfect position to jump through and go immediately into a trap triangle. As always, we punch our arm around the corner, we get a hold of our training partner's head, and we make that quick turn around the corner and lock up the figure of 4. As a result, we're in perfect position to hit a triangle. Once again, we start off in any situation where we go into an underhook. Instead of a conventional underhook with my left hand on his right shoulder, I post and I go across and I get a much deeper grip on the far side of my training partner's neck. When he goes to yank his arm out, it's very, very difficult. Now, from here, I go high stick, just like so. My opponent has to apply a whizzer. Why? If the arm is not in a whizzer position, it's very easy for me just to throw by and take his back. Okay, so he's more or less committed now to that whizzer action. From here, we're always looking to create angle on our training partner. I'm going to bring my foot in close to his hip, and I'm going to step my foot over his lower back. And as a result, I have a ton of space to bring my leg around the corner and lock up the trap triangle. As always, from in here, we're always looking to pull the head in, get a hold of our training partner's head, and then from here start turning the corner. And as a result, we can quickly lock the figure of 4 and strangle. These are 2 very practical ways that we can use underhook attacks to get into a triangle and get the results we're looking for. Now, let's look at one of my absolute favorite grips to enter into a Mote Senkaku, the front triangle, from almost any guard position, particularly supine guards where we've been flattened out on our back. Let's first look in detail at what is this inside wrist grip. We need a training partner in like so. Normally, when we go to attack triangles, you will see people using a basic overhand pronated grip where they're pushing inwards to get a triangle. Okay, and it's a good grip. It works on the idea that if I push my opponent's hand in and I have the other arm extended, I can create a one in, one out situation where I can throw my legs over and secure a triangle. Okay, it's a good method. The inside wrist is based on a very different principle. When I push inwards towards my opponent's center line, my leg goes over his arm and we get the one in, one out scenario. The inside wrist is based on a completely different idea. It's based on the notion of inside control. I'm going to take my thumb and put it inside my opponent's wrist, right at the veins of my training partner's wrist, just like so. Okay? Then I fold my hand back so my wrist is bent back at 90 degrees. Don't have a straight wrist. The wrist is bent back, just like so. This puts my wrist higher than his wrist. Now when Mateus tries to take his hand back towards his center line, it's physically impossible. It's rather like Mateus has been put in an American lock, and the only muscles that govern his ability to bring the hand back towards the center line are the small and weak rotator cuff muscles at the back of the shoulder. So it doesn't look like much of a grip. It doesn't have to be, because the only muscles Mateus can use to bring his hand back are small and weak. So when he goes to push his hand back towards the center line, I can easily hold him out. The only direction he can really move his arm is out and away. And that doesn't help him. That actually makes it easier for me to throw my leg over his shoulder. So let's have a look at how we might use this. From any situation where we start off with our training partner, down here in a supine situation like so, we're going to get our hand to the inside wrist position and hold out here. As Mateus tries to bring his hand back in, I extend my arm and I keep my wrist bent back at 90 degrees. When Mateus tries to bring his hand back in, it feels like you're fighting against a brick wall. Now, I turn onto my side and my hand catches him at the head. So when he tries to posture up, that left hand collar tie makes it very, very difficult. When he tries to bring his left hand back to protect from the triangle, it's impossible. And now from here, I bring my foot directly over his neck and we're in the perfect position to attack. Now that I have my legs in place, I forget about the hand. There's no need for it anymore. As he goes to posture up, we get a hold of our training partner's head. We make the turn around the corner with my 2 feet pointing forwards, and as a result, we're able to put that wedge right behind our training partner's head and neck, and as a result of that, we can enter into a very tight triangle with the lock directly over his head, my knee pointed into the crotch, and the elbow completely controlled. And as a result, we get a very, very tight strangle indeed. Let's have a look at this again. From a situation, from a situation where we're wrestling and our opponent goes to put us down, I catch my training partner in here, and I maintain the inside wrist grip. If my wrist is straight, Mateus only works against my thumb, and he can easily bring his hand inwards. So I want to get extension and my hand higher than his wrist. So as a result, you completely shut him out. Now we go through and we control our training partner at the head and neck, and we turn our hips out onto the side. So I can bring my knee back to my shoulder and easily pass my legs in over the top. Now I can release the inside wrist grip, and I go in to control my training partner's head and arm, and we turn the corner and get our legs into the perfect attacking position. Now as the head and body rise, my opponent goes to posture up and away. Even if he stands up to his feet, it means nothing. Now, it's so easy to get into a good attacking position and finish our triangle. This inside wrist grip is one of the absolute most effective ways to dominate my opponent with inside control and get my legs into the one in, one out position. We can use it in so many different ways. Let's say, for example, I have an underhook on my training partner. This too is a good time for us to use the move. I take my hand across to the far side, and there's my inside wrist grip. When Mateus tries to body lock me, for example, it's impossible when I dominate the inside position like so. Now from here, as he tries to push into me and stack, or if he tries to pull away, my underhook makes it difficult, and we dominate with that inside wrist grip. And once again, we can quickly get into the trap triangle. From here, we punch around the corner, make the usual turns, and from here, we're ready to go. We lock up the figure of 4, and there's our finish. It doesn't really matter what my other grips are. I can even start from a situation where I take an over tie on my training partner, and there, once again, we snatch the inside wrist grip. He tries to push his hand back in, and it's so difficult. From here, it's not a difficult thing to pull our opponent around the corner and go directly into our favorite attacking positions and lock up. Once we get the triangle, you no longer need the inside wrist. You're ready to attack. It's such an incredible grip. You'll be delighted at how easy it is to prevent your opponent from bringing his hand back towards the center line with this very simple grip. And there's just so many contexts in which we can use it. Say, for example, if we're in bottom half guard, and from the situation, I start a simple elbow motion, and we start coming through. I'll put my hand underneath my training partner's armpit when he goes to reach for me. It's so easy now to take that inside wrist grip that we've been talking about, and as a result, go right into our various attacks. As he tries to posture up and away, we get that same action that we're always looking for. The turn around the corner, the lock of the figure of 4, etc., etc. So many ways we can use this very simple, very versatile grip. An extremely effective example of inside position, using our thumb, the bent wrist, and dominating from the inside so we can get to the one in, one out position and start our triangle series. Now, in the previous sequences, we looked at grip-based entries into the front triangle. 2-on-1 grips, over ties, collar ties, overhooks, etc. Okay? Grip is one thing, but one of the really great ways of entering into front triangles from a seated guard situation is to generate kazushi, or off balancing, where I get my opponent out of balance. I get a defensive reaction where they have to rebalance themselves, and I use that momentary distraction to go in and secure the triangle. You guys will remember from other videos that I've made that kazushi is a huge part of my approach to the bottom position. We're constantly looking to get our opponent out of balance And once we get them out of balance, it's so hard for our opponent to prevent some kind of entry into a submission, whether it be legs, whether it be back, kimura, front headlock, or in this case, the triangle. Now, there are a million ways I could show you to off-balance people in different positions, but there is one which is king of all in the seated butterfly situation when it's time to enter into front triangles. This is the method where I push upon my opponent's knee with my foot. Let's have a look at this right now. Mateus is going to be here on 2 knees, and I will be in front of him. This method is useful whenever someone is on 2 knees in front of us and we're working down here like so. Okay. As a general rule, I'm just going to give you a very general rule. It's a broad rule, a rule of thumb. It's not hard and fast, but it's a pretty good general rule. When someone stands up over me, their legs are extended and vulnerable, and it's very easy for me to get inside position. So this is exactly the kind of situation where I'd enter into people's legs, and I will go into lower body attacks most of the time. You will notice that his upper body is further away from me. Let's take a passing stance. His upper body is so far away from me that it's unlikely I'm going to be able to secure upper body submissions. But the lower body is completely open. It's very close and it's extended. And from here, it's easy for me to go into ashigarami. So my general rule of thumb is when someone is standing in my guard, I go lower body attacks most of the time. When someone is on 2 knees, now it's going to be much more difficult for me to go into ashigarami because the knees are on the floor. So most of the time here, I will initiate with upper body attacks when you're on 2 knees. So a general rule, not always, but as a general rule, we typically go upper body attacks when opponent's on 2 knees, and we typically initiate with lower body attacks when our training partner is standing. And I play between those two. Now, I noticed that my training partner is on 2 knees, so upper body attacks make a lot of good sense at this point. We've seen the idea of getting good grips on our training partner. Okay, let's look now at the idea of generating kazushi or off-balancing. What I'm going to look to do is take advantage of the fact that I can place a foot on my training partner's knee. When I do so with my toes pointing outwards. I never do so with my toes pointing upwards. When I push now, there's a tendency to slip off. That's not what you want. You want to form an effective hook so that you can curve your foot around his knee. Look what happens now when I begin a slight pull on my training partner and a push like so, that off balancing. He has to put a hand on the mat. If he doesn't, he's going to face plant right on the floor. Okay? All human beings are hardwired to recover their balance whenever their balance is broken. We all are. It's a human instinct you can't get over. So anytime we're here working with our training partner and I get a quick movement like so, he's always going to go to recover his balance so he doesn't pitch over and fall. Okay? Typically they go with a hand down to the mat. So regardless of the grips that I have, just like so, it's a simple thing for me to put a hand down to the floor. Okay? And so I often have my students drill this simple motion from a hand fight situation as we work like so. I will often have them put hands down to the floor and go to it's moving around spontaneously. And then from here, it's a simple thing for us to get hands down to the mat on either side. Okay? And from here, we're constantly looking to get hands working and a hand down to the floor. Every time he pulls back up, he just goes through and we get hands down to the mat. Okay? So this is a very common and easy situation to work with. Now, anytime we get a hand to the mat, triangle's right in front of you. It's right there, ready to be taken in numerous different ways. Okay? So from a situation where I work like so, I take an inside bicep tie. From here I have a tricep and inside bicep. I just put his hand down on the mat. When the hand's on the mat, it's so easy for me now to come up to the head and pull him forward, and lo and behold, we're right into triangle time. As he goes to pull away from us, we do what we always do. We cover our training partner's arm, we cover the hip, we make that turn around the corner and get our knee pointing into the crotch. And as a result, we can come up nice and high, lock the figure of 4, and get our stranglehold. Once again, we start off in front of our training partner like so. There's that initial grip that we're looking for, and there's the hand on the mat. So easy for us now to come up to the head and kick around in numerous ways to go into the 1 in, 1 out situation. I've got one arm outside my legs, one arm inside as he goes to yank away from me. It's so hard when you control your training partner's head. And so easy for us to come up and make the various locks that we'd like in this position. So we're constantly looking to use our 2 feet in creative ways, pushing on our training partner's legs. Okay? As we go in towards our training partner, it's such an easy thing from here, just to put a hand down to the mat, and then right away we're into that 1 in, 1 out situation, regardless of the grip that we employ. It doesn't matter. Okay? Now, let's note something. We never kick our training partner's leg. It's actually less effective. We always place and push. It's a push, not a kick. A kick will only make your training partners angry and it won't have much effect. Okay? A push, on the other hand, will immediately put them in a vulnerable position. You can work in so many different ways. Once the hand touches the mat, I will often just hug and bring my foot through on the other side. And now, once again, we're back in that situation where we can go on the attack. All we're looking for is the classic 1 in, 1 out. Doesn't matter whether I have a collar tie and we're in business. Doesn't matter whether we have bicep ties on his part. We'll always hand to the floor, like so. If he doesn't bring his hand to the floor, if he doesn't, then he'll go right over. So he has to put a hand to the floor. And we can constantly use the forward pull combined with the push to get a hand to the mat. And once we get a hand to the mat, there's an almost infinite number of ways in which we can go into the various triangles that we favor. So we're constantly looking to use our feet to generate off balancing, get his hands to the mat, and lock up the trap triangle. And as you know, once you get the trap triangle, it's always the same story. It's the transition from trap triangle to figure 4 and get that strangle. Now, we're going to come now to one of the absolute most important sections in this entire video. This is the distinction between penetration with the feet versus penetration with the knees to get to a trap triangle. It is absolutely essential that you grasp the significance of this distinction. There are 2 basic ways for me to penetrate into a triangle from bottom position. Top position is a little more complex. I'll come to that later. I can lead with my feet or I can lead with my knees. They're both great options. The question is, when do I use one and when do I use the other? The rule is pretty simple. The further my opponent's chest is from my chest, the more likely I am to lead with my foot to penetrate to a triangle. And the closer his chest is to mine, the more likely I am to penetrate with a knee to get to a triangle. You must understand the difference and know when to use the one which is appropriate for the situation in which you find yourself. Let's have a look at a situation where Matthias is in front of me, just like so. You can clearly see in a hand fight situation there is space between his chest and my chest. Okay? That space makes it relatively easy for me to lead with my foot. And my foot goes over his collarbone and we penetrate through into the trap triangle. This stands in contrast to situations where we are chest to chest, like so. Bring the knees in. When we are chest to chest, there's no way I can use my foot over his shoulder. It would require insane amounts of flexibility, far beyond human flexibility. So what we do in these situations is we typically penetrate with the knee. The knee comes through first, and the knee leads the way for the foot. Okay? So there's 2 ways I can penetrate to the triangle. I either initiate with the foot, the foot goes over first, or if there's less distance, the knee penetrates inside the shoulder first, and then the foot follows. Okay? And which one you choose is largely bound up with one concept: distance. How far is his chest from your chest? The less the distance, the more I have to use my knee to penetrate first and then get my foot over. The greater the distance, the more I can just throw my foot over his shoulder. At some point, the foot always has to pass over my training partner's shoulder to create the 1 in, 1 out. It has to happen at some point. The question is, do I start with the foot, or if he's closer, do I start with the knee? That's always the question. And what governs the answer is distance. The closer his head is to mine, the more I have to come in with the knee first to open up space for the foot. The further Matthias's head and chest from mine, the more freedom I have to just go directly foot over the top and into the triangles that I'm looking for. Okay, so that's always our guide. We've been looking at seated guard entries into front triangles. In the overwhelming majority of cases of seated guard, the foot enters first. You've got distance, so just throw the foot and go for your trap triangle. But now we're about to switch subject matter. Now we're about to look at supine positions where I'm flat on my back and my opponent's chest to chest. Doesn't matter whether it's closed guard, like so, or whether it's butterfly guard. It's the same thing, chest to chest. From here, it's physically impossible for me just to get my foot straight over. He's too close. So in these situations, it's all about getting our knee in front of his shoulder. And the knee in front of the shoulder creates space so that the foot can follow. But it's knee first, foot second. The general point we're trying to raise is that the closer the distance, the more we will use knee-based methods of penetration. The greater the distance, the more we'll initiate with foot-based methods. You have to know both. You know how you have to be highly competent in using both, and you have to know when to use one or the other. That's our general rule. Now, we've been looking at the idea of seated position, and we've seen that as a general rule, I like to see my students working their triangles in the seated position first, learning them there in the seated position, and then progressing to supine positions where they're on their back. As a general rule, it's easier for most people to generate movement both in themselves and their opponent, generate kazushi or off balancing to enter into the trap triangle and get into work. However, at least half the time you're working from bottom position, you're going to be in supine position. So you've got to have an effective means of going into your triangles when you're flat on your back. One of the big movements which I want to create in this video is the use of the clamp position. This is a method of securing our opponent's head and one arm to set up triangles and many other submission holds too. But for this video, we're going to focus on triangles from a supine situation. Let's look first at what is the clamp. What is it? It's a species of guard which has features of both inside control and outside control at the same time. I'm hoping to point out to you that the clamp is basically an upper body version of Ashigarami. It is based on exactly the same physical principles as Ashigarami, except you're applying it to your opponent's shoulder girdle instead of the hips. Let's have a look just at a broad outline of what is the clamp guard. Okay, from any guard where I'm down on my back, it doesn't matter whether it's inside control or outside control, closed or open, it doesn't really matter. Anytime we're down here and he's in close, if I can take my knee, get onto my side and take my knee in front of his shoulder, just like so. I have my knee here in front of one shoulder and another knee behind the opposite shoulder. So the far shoulder is blocked in front by one knee, and the near shoulder is blocked in back by the other knee. His head and one arm is caught between my knees. When he goes to push into me, my right knee makes it difficult. When he goes to pull away, my left knee makes it difficult. This means that the distance between his head and my head is governed by me. I'm in control of distance. Again, if he tries to push into me, my right knee makes it tough. If he tries to pull away, my left knee makes it tough. And in this sense, his head and one arm is completely controlled by me. This means that it's an easy thing for me to create advantageous angle by touching my foot. Now I look directly into his ear. I have a perpendicular angle. And as a result, it's a very simple thing for me to extract my foot and go into the one in, one out situation and attack with the triangle. Okay? Once again, from any situation, whether it be closed guard or what have you, it's always the same. We start by taking our knee in front of his shoulder. And as a result, I have a knee behind one shoulder and a knee in front of the other. The simple movement of my foot across his body means that I have a direct angle where I can look directly into his ear. And this creates the room needed to extract the bottom foot and go over the top and lock a trap triangle. Okay? We're always looking in these situations to penetrate with the knee. That's why we talked about that idea of knee penetration first when we're chest to chest, supine positions. And now my knee governs that distance in ways which can lead directly into triangles. It's my contention that if you want to call yourself a master of triangles, you have to become a master of the clamp position. If you're going to work from a supine situation and work your way against resistance into triangles, you're going to need the clamp. The clamp guard is, without any question, the single most effective way of governing distance between your head and your opponent's head in ways that set up triangles when your back's on the ground. You must become a master of it. The good news is it's an easy guard to get into. All it requires is the same shrimping motion you use every day to perform a basic elbow escape, but instead of elbow escaping inside his hips, you're elbow escaping inside his shoulders, which is of course much easier. The shoulders are not as strong as the hips. Let's have a look at how this relates to a basic Ashigarami. If we have a training partner here on two knees and he puts a leg up, Ashigarami is based on exactly the same principle. In an Ashigarami, I have a knee in front of the hip and I have a knee behind his knee. The knee in front of the hip prevents him coming forward and the knee behind the knee prevents him going backwards. So that this distance between his knee and my chest is governed by my legs. Okay? And as a result, I can push to form an angle, and now we're in business to go into our various attacks. You can see that there's one leg on the inside blocking and one leg blocking from the outside. And now it's just a simple matter of forming angle, and we've got all of our attacks ready to go. A clamp is exactly the same, except that it's performed on the shoulder girdle instead of the hips. It's based on that same notion of a knee in front and a knee behind, one on the outside, one on the inside. And from here, distance is governed by my knee position. Angle is governed by turning across. Instead of going for a heel hook here, you have control of an arm and an elbow. And as a result, it's very easy to extract the bottom leg and come back into any form of triangle or many other submissions, as we'll see in future videos, from this position. Invest time in the clamp, and I promise you, you will have a much easier time getting into triangles from bottom position. It's no exaggeration to say the clamp is the single most commonly used method of entering into triangles from bottom position among both myself and my students. Nothing else even comes close. One more time. From any situation where my training partner forces me down to my back, my first thing here is to get my body onto its side. So I move out onto my side, even if he's in close. From here, I bring my knee and elbow escape motion in front of his shoulder. And now it's so hard for him to drive into me. When he goes to pull away, it's so difficult. What I do in this situation is a combination of bringing my knees together and one knee pulls to my chest, scissoring back, and the other knee pushes forward. It's not so much a squeeze, which is not really the strongest motion in the world, as it is a scissoring action, where my knee comes back towards my chest. My elbow goes over his elbow. So if he tries to pull his arm out, it's very difficult. And now it's a very easy thing for me to find the angle I want to extract the bottom leg, and lo and behold, we're in business with our triangle. This is a basic introduction to the clamp. We're going to look very soon at a range of ways we can use this clamp to enter into an excellent array of front triangles from bottom position whenever our opponent has flattened us out. Now, we've been talking about the importance of the clamp position. It's a variation of guard which governs distance between my head and my opponent's head and facilitates the entry into triangles whenever we're flat on our back. I want now to look at how I transition from close guard, supine butterfly guards, and half guard into the clamp. What I want is for you guys to get very strong at entering into the clamp from almost any bottom position where you're flat on your back. If you can do this, the number of triangles you attempt will go up greatly every time you get on the mats. So it's important we be strong at this shift from a guard which doesn't really offer much in the way of triangles to the clamp, which immediately makes triangles possible, even probable. So we're going to start off first in a closed guard situation, just like so. Okay, Mateus has hands on biceps. From here, my first thing is I've got to get hands to the floor. So I'm going to pommel in with one hand first. You notice that when I pommel in, I never just pommel in with my hand far from my shoulder, because now Mateus can pommel his hand back inside and go right back to my bicep. So that's no good. I pommeled inside, he pommeled again, and you end up in the same position. So it's important that when we pommel inside, we bring our hand to our shoulder. So now when he goes to re-pommel, there's nothing there for him. Okay, very important. So whenever we go to pommel, we never go in at the same time. We never go in two hands at the same time. It's always one and two. Now my two hands and my elbows are inside my opponent's two hands and elbows. I now pull with my legs, and that puts his hands on the mat. Okay, so that's how we get hands to the floor. He's got hands on biceps. I come in one, I come in two, I pull, and then I catch the head. Now I put my foot on the floor and I turn onto my side. My knee points down at the floor and my heel points up at the ceiling, just like so. When Mateus goes to pull away, it's not easy because of that headlock grip and the tricep grip. And now it's very easy for me to put my foot on the hip and fit my knee in front of the shoulder, my other knee behind the shoulder, trapping Mateus's head and one arm inside my clamp. When he goes to yank out, it's really not an easy thing to do. He's stuck. Okay, and as a result, we're in the perfect position to find angle and extract the bottom foot and go into triangles. Okay, so one more time. From a closed guard situation, I bring my hand inside, hand goes close to shoulder. I bring my second hand inside, hand close to shoulder. My two knees pull inwards and his hands go to the mat. I headlock, turn onto my side and invert my knee and my heel points up. I trap, I bring my foot to the hip, and now we're right into the clamp. When he goes to yank out, it's such a difficult thing, and it's so easy for us now to find the angle we're looking for and go into our triangle. So that would be a good example of working from a closed guard. Now let's look at the idea of working from a butterfly guard. From a situation where Mateus has flattened me out here, okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put one butterfly hook inside our training partner's leg, and we're going to point our knee out and away. Okay, so instead of my knees pointing up like so, I point outwards, and from here I put my elbow inside his bicep and my elbow here above his head. Now I use my right foot to push my body outwards, and I'm now on my side. I'm no longer flat on my back. Now I'm in the perfect position to bring my knee in front of his shoulder, and lo and behold, once again we have the clamp guard. His head and one arm are trapped between my two knees. When he goes to yank out, it's such a difficult thing. It's so easy for us now to go into our various attacks. So once again, we start off in a butterfly guard situation. He's in nice and tight, like so, and we're kind of shut down here. I can't really get much going on, okay? So initially, I want to create a little bit of space. Often from here, we hit a forward shift to create a little bit of space. I put my elbow on the inside, I put my foot outside, and I turn, and my toes point out in this direction. Now it's a very easy thing to elbow escape on the shoulder, bring the knee in front, second knee in behind, and the two knees pinch. When Mateus goes to yank out and pull around, it's so difficult. And from here, you can easily go into the triangle. Now, let's look at the third guard commonly used, which enables us to go into the clamp position. This is from half guard. Let's say Mateus has one of the most common and popular passing positions in the sport of jiu-jitsu. He's locked underneath my arm, he's locked his hands, and hands locked, good. And he has what most people say is a dominant passing position here, okay? We're going to take our hands down towards his hip, just like so. Even if his knees are in tight, doesn't matter. From here, we shift our hips out, and again, My toes point to the outside, my knee inverts, and my elbow goes inside his knee so I can put my knee right in his hip. Now, even as Mateus pushes forward, I just push on his hips, and I start to bring my hand inside his bicep. And as a result, once again, we find ourselves in the clamp. And from here, we can extract our legs and go into a triangle. So once again, he's in here in a good passing position, hands locked. Like so. We get our hand on the hip, elbow inside his knee. I invert my knee so I can bring it right in here like so. Let's look at an important detail. I never want my knee pointing up to the ceiling. Okay, that way it gets caught behind his leg. I'll never get my elbow escape working. So I put my elbow on the inside and I invert my knee. It points down to the floor. And as a result, I easily get inside his knee to a good position like so. I push my body around the corner so I can get my hand in the inside position, and we lock up. As always, my feet point outwards, foot goes over, second knee comes in front, and now we're in the perfect position to go forward into our triangle attacks. Used in this way, you can very easily go from three of the main guards that we use in the sport: close guard, supine butterfly guard, and half guard, and easily transition into the clamp. And once you get to the clamp, you can easily transition into your triangle attacks from the front. Now we're looking at the idea of going into front triangles from a supine position. Previously, we looked at the idea of the clamp position. I want now to enlarge upon that and start to bring in the idea of wrist controls. Anytime someone is in my guard, a classic form of triangle entry from a closed guard situation comes out of double wrist control. This is a move which has been around for eons, and it's been very effective over the years. The idea is that if I have two of my training partner's wrists, I can push one wrist under the other and create a temporary situation where I have the one in, one out. If I were to throw my legs up at this point, now one arm would be outside my triangle and one arm would be inside, and from here I could go in and work. Okay, it's one of those old venerable moves of the sport, which to this day can still have some success. But in truth, I've never really been a big fan of double wrist control to a triangle for an obvious reason. It does nothing whatsoever to control my opponent's posture. So there's a degree to which it relies on the naivety or the laziness of my opponent to be effective. Okay? If I have both of my training partner's wrists and he's alert to the idea of a triangle, as I push in, he should be posturing up, and that will make it very difficult for me to get into an effective triangle. What's required here is that my opponent stay down in a position where from here I can get my knee over his shoulder. Remember, anytime you go to penetrate with the foot over the shoulder, my knee, the hollow of my knee, must go at least as high as the shoulder to make for an effective lock. If my opponent postures up at the exact moment that I push in the wrist, now I'm only going ankle deep, and as a result, no triangle. Because of this, I've always greatly preferred collar tie and wrist over double wrist ties. What I like to do is to go in and secure my opponent's one wrist by going across and feeding his wrist with my bicep. Okay, so he has double biceps here. I put my hand in and I feed his wrist using my bicep so I can go 2-on-1. Now, once I get the 2-on-1 grip, I take my hand inside Mateus's, and then from here I pull him with my legs a little and I take collar tie and single wrist. My left arm has the inside position. My elbow is inside Mateus's elbow. When he goes to posture up, it's almost impossible to get away from that collar tie. It's there for a long enough period of time to go into a triangle. Now, make a strong arm. From here, I'm going to physically push his wrist into his sternum. Now, from this position, sorry, buddy. From this position here, we're going to take our leg and go over the top of our training partner's leg. My second foot goes on my training partner's hip, and that gives me the height to go knee deep up to my training partner's neck. When he goes to yank away, you have the collar tie, and you're sufficiently far over the neck to ensure that you get a good bite on that initial triangle entry. Now, as always from here, the hand goes all the way through in front, and we're in the perfect position to control his posture bring that wedge in behind his head, and then lock up the figure of four in a way where we go directly into the stranglehold. Once again, we start off like so. I bring my hand in and I feed his wrist to my wrist, and we go 2-on-1. From the 2-on-1, I bring his hand down to the floor, secure the collar tie, and then we start an action of pushing in on our training partner's arm. Now from here, I split my legs and throw my leg knee deep over his collar. When he goes to yank out, it's surprisingly difficult because of the simple collar tie that I have. Now, as always from here, we bring our hand through as a scoop grip, and we start that action of bringing our lower back up off the floor. With an advantageous angle like this, it's very easy for us to wedge around our training partner's head and shoulders, and then from this position, locking the figure of four creates an immediate strangulation. As always, the knee points in at the crotch. My strangle knee is lower than his ear, and when he tries to pull away from me, it's shockingly difficult. And from here, the strangle comes on immediately. Now, we've looked at entering into triangles from a supine position, flat on our back, and working from there for our triangles. The first method we looked at was the use of the clamp position, and truth be told, that's my favorite way to enter into triangles whenever I'm flat on my back. We're looking now at a close second, also very, very effective, the idea of controlling the wrist and a collar and getting into good attacking position. I want now to look at the interface between the two. Working from a supine position, I have Placido here. I'll start in a closed guard situation. He has double biceps, straightened arms, good, holding me down. From here, we know we always want to work to an inside position on our training partner and pull him in to a clamp type situation. Okay. Now, the clamp involves that switching, almost like an elbow escape motion, and that frees up my top leg to touch and create an angle. And that makes it very easy for me to extract the bottom leg and go into the various triangles that we like to work with. Okay. Now, there's an obvious counter on the part of my opponent. We start on the biceps. From here, I go in, I go into the clamp position. My opponent knows that ultimately I have to extract my bottom leg in order to go into a triangle. So a knowledgeable opponent is going to hold your knee in this position. And now, when it's time to extract the bottom leg, I can't. So we go back to collar tie and wrist control. But it's not really the wrist. This time it's different. The sport of jiu-jitsu makes it illegal for me to grab small digits. I'm not allowed to grab 1, 2, or 3 fingers. But I am allowed to grab all 4 knuckles. And that's all I need. So I'm going to get all 4 knuckles and hold and turn my training partner's hand outwards. And as a result, it's very, very easy for me to kick over the top and go into our triangle series. As Placido goes to move away from me, it's so difficult to prevent me making that turn that takes me up into a position where my knee points in towards the crotch, all of my legs, lower legs, point in the same direction, and everything is curling up so my lower back is up off the ground. Our whole thing is to go into this inverted position where when we go to lock the triangle, everything's in place. When he goes to yank away from me, it's such a difficult thing. And from here, we've got a very strong finish. So once again, we start off, closed guard situation. I palm my hands to the inside. I get his hands to the mat, and I go through into the clamp position. He intelligently grabs my lower leg so that I can't extract the lower leg and go to a triangle. From here, I take a collar tie. I grab all 4 knuckles, and I extract my training partner's hand. And as a result, it's very easy for me now to go around the corner and make the various turns that we like to make to come up into that wedge position. As my knee wedges in behind his neck, he goes to yank out. It's such a difficult thing. And then from here, we close the figure of 4, and now we have that very, very tight strangulation for the finish. Now, similar things can be said when we work with that idea of passing and gripping in like so. I bring my hand in place and catch my training partner. When I go to push the wrist in, this time Placido blocks me with the elbow, and I can't get past his elbow. Whenever I see that, I plant my foot on the mat, and I shrimp out to the same side and beat the elbow, and then we throw over the top and lock. As always from here, we bring our body around the corner, catch our training partner at the head and make the turn all the way around the corner so we can get those wedges in place. As he goes to yank out, goes to stand up, it's so easy to hook inside that leg and keep that nice tight leg position. That means we have the minimum volume inside our triangle, and as a result, we get very, very tight strangulation. Once again, we start off like so. We go inside. We bring the man forward so his hands go down to the mat. Okay. From here, we go initially into the clamp. He goes to stop me. I get knuckle line, twist, and kick in over the top. He goes to move away from me, finds it incredibly difficult. He goes to stand up, etc., etc. We just hook inside the legs, we lock the figure of four, and there's that stranglehold for the finish. Alternatively, we go through, past the wrist, and he blocks me with his elbow. So I plant my foot and I shrimp outside of his elbow and throw my legs in over the top. As always, from in here, we get a hold of our training partner's head, we make a good turn around the corner and lock up. Now, as our triangle gets set behind our training partner, everything locks through and we end up in the perfect attacking position. So these are some simple ways in which we can use wrist controls to make it even harder for our opponents, stopping us from making that transition into the trap triangle, and from there into the full figure of four for the stranglehold. Now we've been looking at the king of all the triangles, the front triangle. There's no question that this is the most important out of all the various 5 triangles that we work with. It's why we're spending the most time on it. All the triangles we've looked at so far, all the entries, all the finishes have been with us in the bottom position. But of course, the front triangle can be used equally well from top or bottom position. We're going to look now at an interesting sequence that starts with us in the bottom position. We're going to employ an attack on the joints to throw our opponent over. This is often referred to as monoplata, and take top position. Once we're on top, we're going to learn how to convert that top position into a front stranglehold. Let's start off with our training partner in our guard. Let's move back a little away from the camera. So we have a training partner here working in guard position just like so. We're going to go forward and into the clamp position right here. I'm going to take my foot over the top and hook onto my training partner's far shoulder like so. Now, ordinarily, in an omoplata, I would take out my bottom leg and move my body and align my body with that of my opponent. My back is flat on the ground, and as a result, there's relatively little weight over my training partner's head. So his head can rise and cause problems for my attempts to finish. That's why omoplata tends to be a move which is very easy to enter into, but problematic to actually finish on someone. So we see our opponent, maybe he's locking our knee or what have you. We're going to take our foot across like so. Instead of me lying down on my back and lining up with my opponent, I'm going to stay more or less perpendicular to him. And in addition, I'm going to come up to an elbow. So I bring my elbow back behind me and I come up to an elbow just like so. Now from here, I'm going to take my bottom foot and I'm going to put my toes on the mat. I'm going to heist and use my knee to force his head down towards the mat. As I do so, I now get an ability to come up onto my base. Even if Placido goes to resist me at this point, it's very easy for me to plant my hands and put 2 hands on the floor. Now I continue pushing my hips forward. This puts extreme stress on my training partner's arm and gives him a very simple choice. If he stays where he is, I can break his arm here. It's rather like a Kimura lock applied with the legs. Given a choice between a broken arm and a forward roll, most people will go with a forward roll. So from here, we're going to drive our opponent over and put him down to his shoulder. As soon as he does this recovery position and goes down to his back, we're going to take our foot and hook our foot inside. So we now find ourselves in the 1 in, 1 out position that we're always looking for. One of my opponent's arms is trapped inside my legs, and one of his arms is trapped outside. All that's required for me now is to hug the head, put my knee on the floor, and then turn my body across, so that only the head and the arm are trapped inside my triangle. Now I bring my head down to the mat, my legs come off the floor, and I lock the figure of 4. Now I can either settle back and finish from top position, or I can punch my arm through and come up into bottom position and strangle. If he goes to stand up, move around, etc., we do what we always do. We hook inside our training partner's leg and find ourselves in the perfect finishing position. So once again, we're going to start off at any given guard position just like so. Like before, we're going to come out and find ourselves in the clamp situation. We're going to take our foot over our training partner's shoulder. We're going to form an advantageous angle and push out to the side. I put my bottom foot on the floor, and I'm always looking in these situations to build up to an elbow. Now from here, everything is about pushing his head down. He wants the head to rise. I want to come up and heist and force his head down towards the floor. Now, as I continue walking around my training partner's hips, I take my foot up, and we find ourselves now in the perfect one in, one out situation. I bring my legs up. I put my head down on the floor. As my bottom leg locks, we get the figure of 4. Now, I could just strangle right here, or I could roll through. If he stays on the knees, we'll strangle. If he goes to stand up on me, as always, we'll hook our head in towards his legs and finish the strangle like so. One more time from a different angle. From a situation where we start off and enter into the clamp. We pass our foot across our training partner's body. From here, we're always looking to come up to an elbow like so. Now I use my knees to force him down. I heist and bring my body across into a position where I can easily hook around my training partner's head. From this position, I bring my body weight forward and we lock the figure of 4. I can finish top or bottom position, it doesn't really matter. This simple method of rolling our training partner over with the threat of the monoplata and then ending up in a mounted triangle is a very effective way to introduce you to the idea of finishing with front triangles from top position.
Let's look at going into triangles from a range of different positions and bringing in some key themes for our triangle system. The first key theme is this idea of kazushi, or off balance. Look at how we might use it in the case of a closed guard scenario. Brian Glick has inside position for biceps. From here we want to come up to our base. So we're going to bring hands to the inside, just like so. Now, once we bring hands to the inside, the first item of kazushi is to pull in and get my opponent's hands to the mat. Okay? The second one is me taking my hands here, just like so, and turning my hips out to the side. As a result, I'm going to bring my body back and come up to an elbow, and then from an elbow to a hand. My feet transfer this down to the mat like so. Okay, now this is not the strongest position in the world. Your opponent can body knock you here, you can return you back down to the mat. So it's very important we make it as strong as possible. The strength doesn't come from your right hand. It comes from your hip position. I want to use my left leg to bring my hips higher than his hips, so that my chest is almost facing down to the mat. Now when he goes to push into me, it's a lot more difficult because my hips are higher than his hips. Okay? So once again, we have a situation where our opponent's in like so. We bring our hands inside our opponent's hands, and we bring his hands down to the mat. From here, we shift our hips out to the side, and we come up to an elbow. From the elbow, we come up to a hand, I plant my foot, and I start bringing my body up like so. What I want to do now is to make my opponent's hand go out here, give me space for an upcoming triangle. The way I do this is I fake a hip sweep. My opponent's forced to base out with his hand like so, otherwise he'll fall over. He has hands around my waist, and I go forward, he'll knock him straight down. So there's no choice on his part, he has to put his hand up as a basic support. As soon as we see that, now we're going to take our feet off the mat, and we're going to balance on our training partner's hips, just like so. So that 100% of my weight is on his hips. And that which makes it so easy for me to move my head from close to his to far away and pull him into the triangle. Now from this position, this is where all the resistance comes from. Your opponent will want to either stack you or posture up or engage in some kind of defense. So to keep that collar tie in place, my hand scoops inside my training partner's leg. As he goes to stand up, move around, etc., we always focus on bringing our knee around the corner so that our knee and shin are very, very close together. As he goes to pull away from us, It's a very difficult thing. And then from here, we lock the figure of 4 and we get a good strangle for the finish. Once again, starting off in a closed down situation, we bring our hands to the inside position. His hands go down to the floor, we catch, and we shift our hips out to the side. That's going to give us an ability to come up to an elbow. From here, look how I plant my foot and everything goes to the outside. We throw it across him. Now, our weight goes onto him. And as a result, my legs become weightless. And it's very easy for me to throw my legs over the shoulders. When he goes to pull away, posture up, etc., we focus on a quick turn, brings everything around the corner, and a good lock of our legs, so we get the figure of 4 and a good tight strangle. All done? Let's give it a try.